Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Food as Medicine for Breakfast. I'm Dr. Charles Plackett, Executive Director of the Center for Food as Medicine and Longevity. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Nathan Price, Professor and Co-Director of the Center for Human Healthspan at the Buck Institute for Research on Aging. He's a Chief Science Officer at Thorne and co-author with Dr. Leroy Hood of The Age of Scientific Wellness. Dr. Price's work is helping redefine how we think about health and aging. For decades, medicine has largely waited for disease to develop before taking action. Dr. Price's work challenges that model by combining artificial intelligence, systems biology, multiomics, precision nutrition, and personalized health. He's helping build a future in which we can identify biological changes years before disease appears and intervene early enough to improve not just lifespan, but health span. That's the number of years we live healthy, active, and independent lives. Dr. Price, welcome. It's really a pleasure to have you here. And honestly, I've been excited about this more than anything. So welcome. And I'll just jump in and first say hello and jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. Great to be here.
So wonderful. I'm going to start with the first question, which I was listening to a podcast you were on, and I thought it was really interesting. And you shared this observation about healthcare, that it's the only industry that does not study its own gold standard, which is wellness. And I was, sort of wondering about this, how we define wellness rigorously enough to study it and who belongs to a generally healthy reference population. But one of the things that also came to mind is the study of blue zones kind of what you mean? And I'll let you kind of take it from there and we could kind of converse on that.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I do think, there's been somewhat of a shift, where we're getting more and more into this. But if you look at medicine and the biology that underpins it, like so biological research and things of that nature writ large, we have not had a really deep science of wellness. If you look at the National Institutes of Health, right, it's set up as the National Cancer Institute. There's a National Institute around heart and cardiovascular disease. There's one on infectious disease and so forth. So we've had a tendency to really dive deep on what are disease mechanisms. And what are those, and then how do we treat those diseases once they arise? So that's been really very much of the bulk of this. What we haven't done as much of is to focus on what is it that keeps us healthy? What is it that we really need for our bodies to operate properly? It's very, very hard traditionally to write a grant into the NIH and say, I'm going to study a group of healthy people. In fact, when we started to do this, we were flat out, there's no point to this.
I was sure it was very hard to get
this is a worthless endeavor. Was, I think, the general tenor. And so as you think about it, though, more, it's, and we can dive into this in a specific case. Yeah. You just want to, what we're really arguing for is that from the very foundations of biomedicine, we need to understand a lot more about what it is that keeps you healthy. How do you maximize your resilience to disease? What are the things that are happening in the decades before? And then how do we, in fact, generate a deep science around that? We've been on that path for about 13 years or so now.
Wow. And so on that path, what are some of the things that you've not discovered, but some of the things that you think would be well, actually, I'm going to go to the next question, which is you've argued that instead of beginning at diagnosis, we should examine what's happening biologically 10 to 20 years earlier. So you're only 13 years into this, but which early changes are already detectable and which are genuinely actionable that may never progress to disease if we kind of catch them early?
Yeah, let's take a particular example because I think it's illustrative. So let's take Alzheimer's, for example.
Yeah, which is a big concern for everybody, certainly 50 and above.
Big concern. It's one of, maybe the most feared disease in surveys, of people when they're older. Devastating costs. We're all familiar with kind of the horrors of Alzheimer's. So, I wrote a piece on this for the LA Times a few years ago. But you can look at the total investment we've made into Alzheimer's, primarily around trying to clear amyloid with late-stage drugs. And there's very many estimates out there. It's hard to get a really great estimate, but it's anywhere from tens of billions to hundreds of billions. I saw one estimate even as high as $1 trillion cumulatively that we've spent across society over the decades on trying to deal with Alzheimer's disease. And we have very little to show for it. A couple of drugs that are approved by the FDA, small effect sizes, and large costs. So a lot of that is really around the central challenge of how hard it is to deal with Alzheimer's late as opposed to early. So if you're thinking about Alzheimer's late, what's happened? A whole bunch of your neurons have died. You've lost billions more, of synapses in your brain, all those connections that make you you. And there's no pill. I can't even quite conceive of what such a drug would look like that would give you back all of that complexity once you've lost it. Now, if you're talking about early interventions, what you're trying to do is you're trying to keep neurons alive so that they don't die. That's a much, much easier problem. That's, of course, familiar to all of us. It's the nursery rhyme, right? Humpty Dumpty, right? Break the egg. It's hard to put it back together. Stopping it from falling is easier. There's an analogy there that's really relevant in Alzheimer's. So then if you look at the most successful trials so far in Alzheimer's, the finger study, the pointer study that's just been finished this last summer in the United States, those are focused on lifestyle interventions. They use some supplements in the trial, diet, but prevention, basically trying to keep your brain healthier for longer. That has in fact had a real impact. And in fact, I was one of three keynote speakers at this NIH meeting on multimodal therapies for Alzheimer's disease a few years ago. And I just found it so striking back to back. The first talk was a pharma talk, very well done, great statistics, great studies, all the, an A plus kind of view, but you just couldn't help but notice how small the effect sizes were, how big the costs were, what the side effect profiles were, but it's all focused on that late stage treatment.
Right.
Second speaker was Laura Baker, who led the Pointer study here in the United States.
And
Um,
just tell us quickly what the pointer study was, and just
Pointer study is what I mentioned. It's a lifestyle
right.
intervention study. They did it
Different
first.
than the mind study, the mind studies, correct?
Yeah. It's a follow-on to the finger study, which was
Okay.
done in Finland. And so what you saw then were years of benefit in the delay of dementia, and doing so with interventions that were relatively cheap. And in fact, in certain populations where the genetics don't drive it quite so heavily, the Hispanic population in the United States, for example, it's estimated that 45% of all dementias in that population are preventable by lifestyle intervention. And so if we look at mechanisms then, and this is one of the things we're diving into a lot at the Buck, which is not just looking at genetics as do you have high risk or low risk for any particular condition, ApoE4 being the big risk factor in Alzheimer's, but when does that manifest in your life? And what mechanism of aging is it that changed such that it manifested? So if we think about Alzheimer's, at least in our conception of this, you have ApoE4, let's say, so you have higher risk for Alzheimer's, but that doesn't really make a difference to your dementia risk in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s, but it does very much, right? It might make the difference between you remembering your child's name or not when you're older. And so the trigger for that, at least, that we've been looking at is you have these cells called astrocytes. Then there's 9 of them around each neuron, and they support neurons energetically. So as you get older, one of the things that happens is that as you perfuse, you get worse and worse at perfusing oxygen into your brain. This makes it harder for your energies to make enough, your neurons to make enough energy to stay alive. And then if you go into this, and we worked with a company doing these digital twin models some years ago, was quite interesting. And basically, if you run simulations like digital twin simulations on the brain, what you find is that there's a difference in how efficiently you can keep neurons alive under low oxygen conditions between different variations of ApoE. So it turns out that to make those astrocytes really help the neurons efficiently, you want to keep cholesterol levels inside the astrocytes low. ApoE has this role in the transport of cholesterol out of those cells. ApoE4 does it very slowly, so it stays high. It kind of gums up the energy transfer. ApoE2 is super fast, and so that energy transfer stays efficient. And so if you just run a simulation on that fact, you can recapitulate the age of onset of dementia on average across all the different populations of all the different genotypes, ApoE4, 4, 3, 4, 2, 3, and all those kind of things. And so what's really striking about that is that shifts then very much the way that we would think about Alzheimer's. For one, it does not view amyloid as causal to Alzheimer's disease, and we have spent, again, hundreds of billions of dollars, something like that, in trying to clear amyloid. When you clear amyloid out of the brain, it does not perform better. But now we can shift a lot earlier, and you can say, all right, if it's this energy deficit that's happening, okay, well, let's focus on blood perfusion, for example. And this explains also a few what were somewhat surprising observations. One was that Viagra had this unexpected effect on lowering rates of Alzheimer's when they did a meta-analysis of
Because it
this.
was increasing blood flow. Is that why?
Because of blood flow, right? Exactly. This is why the amyloid, if you have this strong view on amyloid, it's like, why would that be? Once you understand this connection to blood flow, that makes sense.
And
Another one
so,
is
sorry, exercise, would that be one too? Like
exercise helps. Exercise helps.
cardiovascular exercise.
Cardiovascular health helps, and people know that those things are correlated.
Yeah.
Another one out of Finland, observationally, is people that do sauna 4 to 7 times a year compared to people who don't get dementia at 60% lower rates. And
Sorry to cut you off, but
so
it's
again,
interesting. I have
kind of
people
puts that.
tell me about sauna all the time, and how healthy it is, but just 7 to 8 times a year.
No, 4 to 7 times a week.
Oh, 4 to 7.
If
Okay,
I said
okay.
a year, that was definitely
Yeah,
a
yeah.
mistake.
Just I thought I heard you say, yeah, we'll look back
If
at the
I did,
tape.
that was a mistake. No, I was definitely
I'm glad
thinking
we
week.
corrected it.
Maybe I did. Thank
And
you.
it's funny because I've
I wish
heard
it was
that.
that low a dose.
Yeah,
That would be nice.
and
I
I
do have
think
a sauna in my house now, so I do it quite
yeah,
often.
and now after this, I'm going to do sauna frequently. And my one of my close friends and one of my business partners is a sauna fanatic, and he's been telling me this for years. And I'm like, yeah, okay, Nick, that's great, but now I'm going to listen to him, and get in that sauna at least.
This one seems to have real effects. And then one other thing I'll say is that as we were in the process of, kind of going through the models and developing this kind of an approach, there was a paper that came out from UCLA right in the middle of that, which was very striking, where they did um, imaging of the brain and where they would look for areas of what they called hypometabolism, low metabolism. And they were able to show that this lower energy production was right in the regions of the brain that died first. And they showed that this happened 8 years in advance of the diagnosis of Alzheimer's. So that was like,
That's a huge amount of
to
time.
me, as we were going through, just the simulations were sort of pointing us that way. But then when that UCLA paper came out, it was so you could just see it. And then there was the sauna example, there's Viagra. So there's so much just convergence, I think, of evidence around this, and it just shifts your model. So, for example, if we think about a scientific wellness kind of point of view here, one of the things that I don't have a good measure for today, I can't get from a doctor or anywhere, is how much excess metabolic capacity do I have in my brain? Because when you're younger and you're easily able to satisfy your energy need for your neuron, you have a lot of excess capacity. Then the difference between ApoE4 and ApoE3 and ApoE2 and their efficiency, it doesn't really matter. In the business world, I'll often compare this to like a profit, a P&L or something like this for
Yeah.
people, because it's like, okay, if you're making a lot of money and there's something that's kind of a cost that you're bearing, it's fine. It's like you live. As soon as it's like break even, it's like you're negative or positive, right? Which is what's happening in the neurons. Now that difference matter is life and death. It's like you're either alive or the neurons start dying. And once the neurons start dying, like and it's not evenly distributed. There's certain areas of the brain that go really negative first. But once some of your neurons are dying, now what you have to do is you have to increase the demand on the remaining neurons. So their energy need goes up. And so that starts creeping up as your ability to do it creeps down. You get in this cycle of the neurons starting to die, and you get in this cycle that leads to dementia. And so that excess metabolic capacity is really important, and we have no measure for it. You can measure amyloid. You can measure tau, right? You can measure these different things related to the pathology of Alzheimer's. But I would argue from a wellness perspective, what we really want to know is my brain still really good at making energy? Is it
Right.
not? If not, why is it? One thing we found was that there was a particular compound that appeared to be rate limiting as you got into those lower energy states, which was phosphatidylcholine. So this is something you can have in your diet. Observationally, people who eat diets rich in phosphatidylcholine get Alzheimer's about 3 years later on average.
And tell us what foods and is there a dietary supplement and does it break the
Yes, yes,
bioavailable?
both of those. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, just yeah. So phosphatidylcholine is eggs are a very good source of that, and so
Whole eggs, not egg whites, whole eggs. Yeah.
yeah, and so you can get phosphatidylcholine out of eggs. That comes with kind of the whole package of eggs. You can also take it as a supplement, and yeah, and you can take phosphatidylcholine as a yeah, as a dietary supplement from a bunch of companies.
Yeah.
And full
Is
disclosure,
there,
including mine, but you can get it from a bunch of places. Yeah.
yeah, of course. And it's bioavailable. It's not one of those trick supplements where it's not bioavailable and you're like
Yeah, you can get it in different forms and make it bioavailable. Now, there is one quite interesting caveat to it, which is, and this comes into why I'm such a big proponent of a systems point of view and trying to get a lot of data out of your body and take your personal, health journey. There's a small subset of people that will have certain kinds of bacteria that live in their gut microbiome. And if you have certain bacteria in your gut microbiome, they actually eat phosphatidylcholine. And so they will actually take phosphatidylcholine and they'll do a transformation of it into another compound called trimethylamine. Now, trimethylamine comes into your blood, and your liver will oxidize that to form trimethylene oxide, which is better known as TMAO. TMAO in the blood is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So this is one of those really deep personalization aspects that I
wow.
think is really critical because you could be, taking a supplement or loading up on, just eating, eggs,
It could be actually worsening. So
and
that's
you
where
would get these trade-offs. Yeah, exactly. You would
yeah. So
get
how do you
you
know?
would
How do
you'd
you
aim
know?
and you'd hit the wrong thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so how do you know? Like, it seems so difficult to navigate these waters, and I use that expression because I just started getting into sailing, a few years ago. So, and I know what it's like to be in difficult waters. And this sounds like difficult waters. It sounds like, okay, if I do this, I'm damned. If I don't do that, I'm damned. And then you hear about the mind diet. You hear about just what you just said, which, to be
Right.
honest with you, I've been working for 3 years on a book and that's the first time I've really heard of that, and that frightens me, from a
Right.
research perspective, and I get concerned, and then knowing, the microbiome is still all new, and we're just learning about all of that and how the impact it has. So, what is someone to do, and how does your health span model that you're working on that right now, your AI, it's an AI program that sort of
Yes.
incorporates. Could you talk about that a little bit, and then we could swing back to some of these things and how they all work together?
Yes. So that is a real issue, as we've gotten into this, area of scientific wellness, because you can think of wellness as a very simple kind of thing, and you can also see it as something very complex. Like the simple point of view, which I think kind of prevails when things are going well, right? You have your diet and your exercise and your behavior,
Yeah.
it's kind of locked in and it just feels like very simple. And then when you get kind of knocked off kilter, it's you don't quite have it. All these things are so interconnected and you find, as you get in the details that the complexity of all that it takes for you to have that, wonderful wellness experience through your life is there's a lot to it. So you mentioned AI, and this is what I'm really excited about right now because we have the ability to take all this complexity and not put all the cognitive burden on the person, but you can really own a lot of that within the algorithms in such a way that people can kind of start to navigate this. So in my case, we're doing two different AI systems and on the two different aspects of my work for
Yeah.
supplement recommendations and so forth. At Thorne, we built an assistant called Taya, which is available for free on the website that people can interact with if they just have questions to do with anything related to that. So we've built a consumer version of that people can use if they'd like. Uh,
So it's just for random questions like, hey, I'm 61 or whatever it is, and I work out every day, and I don't eat fish. I do this. What supplement should I be taking? That kind of generalization.
That kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. Or you
Yeah.
say, here's I'm really focused on this aspect of my health, and you can converse back and forth with it. It can go quite deep. We built a very extensive knowledge system behind it, and so there's a lot that it can answer and do. People
And
have
does it
the
actually ask? Does it ask questions of the individual too,
It
or not?
does, yeah. So if you go in and you say something like, I'm having trouble sleeping,
Yeah.
Aya will try to figure out, it will start asking you questions like, are you having trouble falling asleep? Are you having trouble staying asleep? Is it stress related? Is it like, it will go through a series of questions to try to determine like what might be the best thing in your particular.
And is that the backbone for the health span model that you built? Or is that sort of the same backbone, the same AI, or they're completely
No, they're separate. They're separate. So my
yeah.
buck job and my thorn job are
No, I know they're completely different,
separate.
but I was saying is that I mean you're the same individual developing them, so I'm just wondering if they have some of the same elements, not from a trademark or a copyright version, a legal perspective, but just
Yeah, I cannot have extremes on that stuff. Yeah.
but just how it. I guess I really want to understand how the
I
health
mean,
span
they're both
project
rooted
works.
in the sense of the
Yeah,
vision for scientific wellness, as is a very big part of the industry, right? Of all these things that
yeah,
we're doing together.
right.
Um,
But the algorithm that you put into the health span project, and that's how I'm calling it. So let's talk
is
about that.
different. Yeah. So I was just going to switch to that
Yeah,
one as
yeah,
well. So on the Buck side, and this is the big flagship initiative that I'm focused on here, is something called Healthspan Horizons.
right.
And Healthspan Horizons is a nonprofit research project. And as part of that, we have developed what we call Healthspan Compass. And so Healthspan Compass is an AI system that we have. We have demo versions available for people to try out right now, and we'll be launching it in the not too distant future here, aiming for before the end of this year. But what that is doing is that we want to make available for individuals so they can pull lots of deep data from all kinds of different consumer interactions that they're doing. There's 500 billion health data points generated every day right now, just from the
That's through
internet.
like my charts and like Epic, or is that what you're talking about, or where are the data
Could be
points
my
coming?
chart, Epic. Maybe they do a function health, they do a function test, or they wear a Whoop or an Aura ring, or they've got any number of these things. And we're talking to a number of different potential partners on this as well as people have the right to use their own health data for whatever they want to do. So you can donate
Right.
it in, can put in the data. What we're looking for there is for people to have a good experience with the AI system where they can start to do this. It allows like charting, going deep on lots of different analyses. You can pull in your genetic information. I'll talk a little bit about some of the kind of things you can do here in a moment. But the idea behind HealthSpan Compass then is that individuals can get more ownership over their own health, where they can find out from the scientific literature, oh, what were those bacteria? Oh, there's those bacteria that like turn phosphatidylcholine into trimethylamine. Um, you know, do I have that? Maybe you did a microbiome test. Maybe you did either, like Jonah or Tiny Health or someone, a group like that. You have a microbiome test. You can upload it in and say, okay, do those bacteria appear in here, the ones? So what we're trying to do is kind of make the scientific literature, which can be very opaque and feel very distant to people. And it's super hard to remember, even for someone in the field, right, to think about like everything that we know about these different topics onto your health. We want to make those things more visible and more accessible. So we're working right now with the IRB and kind of figuring this out. So
Yeah.
this is going to be this HealthSpan Horizons research study. So by people coming in, what we'll be looking for is to participate in a research study. So to get research access to an AI system that can help to navigate, people can use that
So
for.
they can sign up. They can sign up now.
You can sign up now. Yeah, if
And
they go to
where do you
healthspanhorizons.org,
go? It's what's the URL?
healthspanhorizons.org.
And you can go
Uh,
and you can sign up to be a participant in the research study.
you can go, you can sign up. You won't be signed up for the research study quite yet, but you'll be put on a list to be let know about it like the moment it comes out. You
Comes
get
what?
kind of
Okay.
put at the top of the list. So we have some hundreds of people that have signed up so far. We just opened it up, and so there are. Um, and we've got about 1,000 followers on it right now. So early
Yeah.
stages, but we're just
I'm adding. I'm telling you. I was going to tell you right now because I'm having a little bit of FOMO, because you mentioned so many things that I don't know about, and this is an area that I'm, like, what? Let's just take a step here because there are a lot of lay people. There's a lot of science researchers on this that are listening. There's, we have a lot of people on this webinar right now, and I'm just wondering, just what if I meet you and we're introduced by your best friend and you say, "Oh, Charles, nice to meet you." We're talking, and I say, just off the record, what should I be doing? Like what test should I be getting? Because I just saw this. I do a news and research digest every week. It goes out to 160,000 people around the world, and that's not a plug. I'm just telling you because you don't know.
yeah,
And I just saw an article that the inventor of Spotify, the founder of Spotify, started this whole, I think it's called Nico,
yeah.
and it's a scan, and it's only in Scandinavia and the UK and Sweden. I'm going to Sweden next week, and I'm like, oh, maybe I can get that scan. I should be getting that scan. They just put in $700 million. I'm starting to get a little concerned that even though I'm right here, I'm not up to speed on all these things that I should or could be doing, especially if they have the financial resources to do them. So you mentioned like getting a microbiome scan or test,
Right.
and all these things that potentially, yeah, they're false negatives, but it's always good to sort of have an idea of where you stand and what you could be doing and what supplements you should be taking, and not just having, a layperson's view, but having the right advice, right? So what is that right advice? And I was going to ask you this at the end, but I'm dying to know, and I was going to ask you too, like, what supplements should I be taking? I just turned to my 60s, and I'm athletic. I try to work out every day. I just biked up from in the middle of New York City and took my life in my own hands, biking on the streets of New York City to get here to do this interview with you. And someone that I was with said, "Why are you biking? Why didn't you take the electric?" I said, "Because I'm in my 60s and I want to get some exercise." What is it that I should be doing? So from the book that I've been working on, I started taking creatine for brain health and for muscle recovery. I started taking omega-3s, EPA, and DHA because I don't eat fish. I take curcumin, for arthritis and things like that, and have noticed huge differences, shockingly and surprisingly, because I'm really a naysayer. I take vitamin D and vitamin A, and I take a Centrum. Not a plug for them, but I saw that they paid for a study, Centrum Silver, but it was very successful. And I also take some other supplement.
Yeah, Laura Baker, who I mentioned
Yeah.
before it was led the Pointer study, actually did the Centrum study as
Oh, she
well.
did the Centrum
I've
Silver
talked with
study.
her
Yeah.
about it, and
Great research.
she's a very, very good researcher, one of the
Yeah.
best clinical trial researchers in the country, certainly for lifestyle and all these kind of things. And yeah, she was shocked by that result actually.
I couldn't
In that
believe it.
population, it made a big difference, and that we often don't see that.
And it's funny with multivitamins because I remember when I first started my PhD program, I was writing my second book, and I wrote this article like about multivitamins, that it's a waste of money and a waste of energy. And I had like 20 people that I interviewed, top of the researchers. And then of course, her study came out, and some various, and people take multivitamins for insurance. It's like an insurance policy.
Yeah, yeah.
So again, there's a long-winded question. So what, without, feeling liable by saying the wrong thing, what should we be doing if no one was listening? What, what should we be doing if we can afford it? And microbiome test. If you were telling your mother, or you're telling your uncle, brother, sister, someone you cared about, what to do, what would it be? Like, you know,
Yeah. So I think in my mind, I really like, I'm not a really big believer in like the protocol for people
right?
because
Because that's your whole program about personalized nutrition. Yeah,
yeah, it's all because to me it should be very personalized. One of the reasons I really do
yeah,
like, and spend a lot of time trying to build AI systems and things like that to try to make that as accessible as possible. And there's a whole ecosystem, right, of many companies and many groups that are starting to populate this.
right,
So some of the things that I do believe in though, so one is, I think doing a genetic test is really well. Actually, let me back up. The things that are the most impactful by far, just to state
Yeah,
the obvious, are sleep well, exercise,
right.
eat
I don't
nutritiously.
mean to roll my eyes about those, but
Yeah,
yeah, they're
yeah.
important.
I don't want to, I'm not going into it because I just consider like we all know
Eh,
that,
eh,
but just for credibility's sake, like we all know those
No,
are the
but
things that
by the
make the
way,
biggest
since we
difference
have a little
right
bit of
now.
breathing room here, I sleep. I worry because the research is showing if you get under 6.7 hours of sleep, it'll impact you. I mean, I can't. No matter what I do, I even take Zolpidem sometimes. I don't sleep more than 6 hours. I just don't.
Yeah.
My body doesn't do it. You know.
Yeah, so I think so anything that affects those foundations make a big difference. And a lot of what, at least that I focus on more on, if we're talking about like the supplement side and so forth, is to try to augment or get a little bit more benefit from a lot of those things. Like creatine you mentioned. Okay, if lifting weights is incredibly important, right? Strength training. If you take creatine along with lifting weights, you'll get a little more benefit, right? You'll get a 3 to 5% bump in kind of the amount of strength or muscle mass that you get from a training program. If you're not training, you won't get a lot from that. You might still from the brain health side, but that's still kind of an open
Right.
question, a little bit less data there, although it seems to have some important effects. Uh, you want to be watching for what was the other one I was thinking of? Anyway, or you're trying to get your metabolic health better, right?
Right.
Berberine or bergamot is useful, kind of in concert though with controlling your diet, right? You're not gonna overcome a high sugar diet by by something that's will have a supplemental effect. The I do think following your nutrients can be incredibly important if you hit just the right thing. An obvious example, but was one that was meaningful to me. A good friend in graduate school, was really going through some challenges, was thinking about dropping out of his program, and just wasn't quite finding the joy in it. We were having a lot of conversations about he's questioning his life philosophies, all these kind of things. Anyway, ends up going through to a bunch of doctors, ends up getting a blood test. He's low iron, didn't he was low in iron. Starts taking an iron pill. Week later, he's feeling way better, and he goes on to finish his PhD. He goes on to MIT. He goes on to a hedge fund. He now runs an
Yeah.
AI division for Amazon. Like he's a super
Yeah.
genius
Yeah.
guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really
Of
good,
course.
really good.
Of course. All
Could have
because of
lost the whole
iron.
thing, all because of iron. Another one, guy, really prominent person actually, he had a chance to have one of the first human genomes ever done back in the day,
Wow.
and he had this terrible condition where his doctor said he was going to be in a wheelchair and not be able to walk for the second half of his life. And and he got one of these first genomes, and they noticed that there's all these known variants that block uptake of vitamin D, and he had all of them. And so, so the people, they had this like huge book because it was before these had been turned into consumer, right? They're flipping through and they're like, oh yeah, you have like every variant that blocks vitamin D. And they kept going on.
Yeah.
He's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. He's like, stop, go back. And he ended up finding that he started taking mega doses of it and his disease condition reversed. And
That's incredible.
he's got
And
onto an incredible career, a
that's
very high level in science and business and so forth. And
wow.
and it was, and now the thing I want to make clear there, most people are not going to have anything like that kind of a response, to vitamin D, right? Or something.
Right.
But
Right.
for him, he had a severe deficiency because he was genetically disposed to not be able to, all of his receptors were
Right.
impaired, basically. So it made a huge, so the point I want to make there is that these things can have a very big effect. Typically, though, it's got to be the thing that's really limiting for you. Other, very basic stuff, uh, sauna usage that we talked about, right, makes a big deal.
Right.
I would do a supplement if I'm doing the sauna a lot, which is electrolytes. Pretty
Well,
basic. You're going to
but I was
sweat a
meaning like
lot.
the testing that you could possibly do.
Oh
Like,
yeah, the test. Oh yeah, let's come back
yeah.
to the testing. So the
Yeah.
testing side is so a genetic test. I think is really good to kind of know your baseline. Like, what are you
Right.
at risk
And
for?
where does one go to get a genetic test? Like, where is that? How does that happen?
Yeah, there's
It's a
a number of
swab.
them out there. Self decode, I think, has got a quite a
Right.
nice battery of tests, and different things that they can compute off that. So that's probably a go-to at the moment in terms of just the insights and wherever. And there's a whole bunch of consumer genomics tests that you can do.
And just so the audience knows, I posted. I'll post this video and it has a transcript, so you could be able to. You don't have to take notes right now. You could wait till it's posted, and you can take all this information down because I know I'm going to do that. So,
Yeah, so
yeah.
I think that's good.
So genetic test is one. Yeah,
Genetic test is one. One thing that we'll make available in this Healthspan Compass system,
yeah.
just because this does not exist out there in the market yet. But in the science that we've done, one of the really interesting things with genetics is that you can predict the level of certain biomarkers like LDL cholesterol. And what we showed in a study that we did on thousands of people was that whether or not you can lower your LDL cholesterol by lifestyle is predictable by your genetics. So if your genetics predicts you high and you're high, we saw no statistical ability for people to lower their LDL. But if their genetics predict low and they were actually high, we saw very big ability. So that gap tells you something about what's modifiable. That's one of the things we're going to fold into Compass so people can just see that directly. We just
It's so funny
it
that you bring
hasn't
that up
existed in
because
the marketplace, but the science is actually quite good on
it's
this.
so funny that you bring that up, Dr. Price. So I was here I am. This is my space, food, nutrition, PhD, all this stuff, and working out every day and eating perfectly or not perfectly, but trying to eat really well. And all of a sudden, I go to the doctor, and my doctor's like at a central casting, you know, and he's comes in and he's like, I looked at your panels, your cholesterol has been high. It's been a year. I was like, that's crazy. I can't believe it. So I said, well, I'm not going on Lipitor. I'm not taking anything. Give me 6 months to a year. I'm going to get it down. So I worked like crazy, and everything else. So then I finally just, capitulate. I just go, look, all right, it's not working. He was like, well, maybe you're genetically predisposed. I mean, your genetics are probably not modifiable. I go, okay, fine. Then I'm sitting and talking to my mother and sister. And I said, oh, I have to go on this. I'm embarrassed. She's like, oh, we're both on it. I said, why would you not tell me that? that everybody's genetically, is sort of
Yeah.
not modifiable. And so that's, it was sort of interesting that you brought that up because that's exactly the situation that I had, which, I saw it as a huge, blight on my record, but really some things you just cannot modify and you have to sort of take the right pharma piece to it. And it's not a sin or a crime or anything. It just is what it is. And you need to keep your cholesterol low. Yeah.
Yep.
So other tests. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, the genetics I think is important. Blood measures, so there's all the like broad panels that you can do these days. Function has a nice one that's pretty broad.
This is
You
function
can
health.
also do function health. Yeah, you can also do obviously you can just do lab or Quest directly. If your doc, you can get it covered by insurance, at least once a year. If,
Now, does function do anything different than like when I go to my get my annual? I tell my doctor is I'll whatever it takes, do every possible test there is with my blood.
If your doctor will be expansive, you can probably get it through your doctor
Right.
because Function does all their tests through Quest, so it's not like a different thing. It's a little more consumer friendly in terms of giving you a dashboard and visualization, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
basically a wrapper with a light AI, right?
Right.
And there's a bunch of those out there too. There's a whole, there's various
Right.
companies that have been put together that way. But it's not hard now to get a pretty good comprehensive, blood panel. And I do think that's useful for people. Another one that I think is really helpful is the DEXA scan, which gives you your body composition. So you can get bone density, muscle mass, fat, things of that nature. So
Won't test for cancer. Just so everybody knows, it will not test for cancer. DEXA scan.
no, it's not a test for cancer. It's a test for, yeah, body composition. You can certainly go do like, if you're willing to spend a little more, right, you can do MRIs and so forth and like really get a sense of your cardiovascular health as well. Or you can,
Or
so
you
all
can get
these
a CT scan
CT
too.
scan. Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, or you can do a CT scan and you can get like what's happening in your arteries. Doing that occasionally, I would say is important, especially as you get older. That starts to be a real risk factor. So, understanding that is important. Um, the wearables, I think, I really like having, a wearable, whether it's an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring or a Whoop or something like that. I think some sort of feedback where you can, especially where you can notice trends, like, oh, you've been sleeping a lot less the last 2 months than you did the 2 months
Yeah.
before, and or your steps have gone down significantly or up significantly, as the case may be.
Yeah.
Just kind of having a view of that, I think, is very, very
Yeah,
useful.
I get reprimanded every day by my Apple Watch because it says that my sleep score is not, I'll have like 2 days a week where it's like, oh, congratulations, you got a sleep score of over 75.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
VO2 max is a really good predictor of longevity. That's something that to do well, you have to go in somewhere, and wear a mask and like do an exercise test. But doing that periodically, along with functional tests, where you can do, well, they'll just kind of measure like how your body moves in different ways, and are you losing range of motion? Are you gaining range?
was that from a physical therapist or where would you get a range
Yeah,
of motion?
you can do those kind of things in physical therapists. Are probably the most common
Yeah.
way to do that. Um, and so those kind of things I think really really help. And then microbiome is another area. This one's a little more controversial in medical spaces because they feel like they're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
I find quite a lot of useful information in the microbiome. I mentioned the issue with phosphatidylcholine, whether or not you make certain B vitamins in your gut, can have makes a difference. The microbiome testing, though, I think is the way to think about that, I think, is for people who want to explore, and especially if you're having a gut issue or and but you should expect not to necessarily get in one shot like a totally definitive answer necessarily, but it is a tool where there's a ton of information. There's a lot in the scientific literature. AI systems let us, evaluate that more. I think you have to go in there a little bit savvy because there's
So where would you go to get your microbiome tested? Like
so
that's not something Quest or yeah.
two companies that we're, talking to a fair bit these days, or that I think have good, and I have no financial relationship with either, I'm
Yeah,
really
yeah.
clear. We're just like, I went to one of the, I know some of the people there and have been talking about them, but two that I think are probably two of the best ones are Tiny Health and Jonah. And so those two are two that I'm kind of looking at a fair bit right now. And so those are ones that people can go and take a test and get a sense for what those are at. Um, and I think part of those, and I like to do microbiome tests on myself as well. And I think that you should take that as information. You'll get a lot of interpretations off of that. And for some people, it will really unlock something that they're able to figure out. But it's a little bit of a figure out exploration because the microbiome is very, very complex for
Now
sure.
let's say I get all these tests done, the range of motion, the genetics. Now, is there a future where I'll be able to put this in the health span horizons and be able to get sort of start getting a plan of what I need to do and what supplements I need to take? And is that in the future? Is that now? Is that what you're
Yeah,
aiming for?
this is exactly what we're building with Healthspan Horizons is, and doing it under the auspices of a research project.
Yeah.
And so the idea there is that yes, we're going to try to bring together as much of this information and make that easy for people as possible. We'll be asking people to donate basically, the data that they're generating on their own to be used de-identified or anonymously for research purposes. And the idea there is we want to like help people navigate their own trajectories, right? We'll have HIPAA and privacy protections in place,
Right.
all the stuff that you would expect, like a firewall between the researchers and people who are doing their own journey. So, so
Right. So I could put in my health data from Apple. I could take my genetic test. I could take my range of motion test. I could take my DEXA scan. I could take my CT scan, feed that all in and say, hey, what should I be doing here?
that's right.
Right.
That's right.
That, I mean, that's,
And and then we're building out kind of a whole science of health span underneath it. So there's this whole computation layer that goes in,
you'll have a dashboard like the fancy dashboard and
yeah, yeah. So we'll be building all those things out. And and if people want to sign up, you can already take a look at the demo and see kind of what it's looking like.
and
Uh,
and I guess if you have people that are interviewing you and show you in a favorable light, they can get on that list I'm joking.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
You know,
No, totally. And so, and then what will happen is that, though it'll come out in a first version, it won't be, and it'll handle certain kinds of data, and then over time,
right.
we'll extend it, is the way that will go. And there's a lot of these tools that'll be coming around. The thing that I like around, and why I've been thinking about this so much as a big longitudinal research project, is there's so much that we don't know as humanity about the levers that really make a difference to us having a reliably long health span. And we all can think of people we love who, died too early and all the,
Yeah,
issues.
I like my mother who just died a few months ago. Exactly. So, question. So a couple more questions because I haven't
Mhm.
looked at one of my questions yet, which are on another screen, but there was something I want to ask you, which I thought was interesting. So I'm not embarrassed about anything I do. I just was biking up from getting my hair cut and the barber dyes my hair, and which I'm not embarrassed about. I've gotten Botox before. And I thought to myself, I think there's something to one, the way I'm treated differently. Like my daughter even treats me differently. When my daughter, my wife wanted me to dye my hair. We were in the barber shop and they said, "Oh, do you dye the hair?" "Yeah, it's $25. Can you do it?" And I of course said, "Okay, just do it." And now I've
Yeah.
been going to this guy, for the last year and a half. And I just think like there must be something to this because first of all, it's not just the interaction of how I feel, but it's also how people interact with me. And I just wonder, when I've done an article about graciousness and how it impacts longevity and health span, and there's real strong research on it. Have you heard or saw anything about how the impact of, let's say, taking care of yourself, buying new clothing, looking presentable, and in terms of aging, health span, maybe there's chemical cortisol level. I'm not sure. I just wanted to pose that out there and see if any of this hypothesis is any rings any bells, or you've seen anything on it or thought about it.
Meaning the degree to which like appearance and that kind of thing
Yeah,
plays in.
appearance and reaction from individuals, in in the world, and also feedback of how you feel about yourself and how you take care of yourself.
I,
Yeah,
I think it makes a big difference. We in the initial white paper that we wrote up about health span horizons, we've kind of broken it down into these different spans, and we intentionally chose a top layer that we thought would be more like the kind of things that a person in general really cares about or thinks about,
yeah,
and then there's kind of a scientific layer underneath that. One of those that we chose, like the most controversial or the hardest one to kind of pick on is we included one in there called beauty span,
it's interesting. Yeah,
related to appearance. Um, and the idea there is not just to be like surface level, it really relates to kind of how your deep health does manifest in a degree, right? So, does you know, the elasticity of your skin hold up? Are you, you know, is your underlying musculature good? Is your anyway all is your hair staying, are you keeping color in your
right.
hair? We've seen that some of those things are reversible by stress. Martin Picard's got a bunch of stuff that, yeah, he was here at the Buck recently, and it's really interesting experiments on that as well.
Yeah, just look
uh,
at every president how they lose. Other than our current
yeah
one dies of
and
sugar, but the other ones lost all their color.
yeah, and we
Yes.
debated that a little bit, but it is something that we care a lot about. It's an enormous industry for one. So, I mean, people spend on it. We all care about it. There is, um, and what we really want to do is connect the science of health span back to things that we actually really care about, right? Like feeling young and all that comes with that. The curiosity and vibrancy and excitement, in our minds, the both the feeling and the external ability for others to see our vigor and strength and beauty and all the things that we might want to project in that way as well. um, our sense of courage, our sense of openness, our sense, like all those things are really meaningful to having a life that we feel is exciting and good in the ways that we want. And so we are, as we're building out the science of health span, what we're trying to do is to tie what's happening on a molecular level back to those emergent big human things that we actually want to
Oh,
persist
cool.
for as long as possible. And so we're trying to kind of deepen those. And so the goal of Healthspan Horizons is in part to, have a community that we're really interacting with, and that's having their experiences and having, what they're able to push forward and do, and then trying to learn as much as we can from the science behind that, and then share that fully and completely out to the world and to all the people that are participating with us. So that's what we're really trying to catalyze.
It's really exciting. So all right, so I'm going to look back since we only have about 9 minutes left. I wanted to look at some of the questions that I actually created for you, um, which I know it's a good program for me anyway. When it's sort of like goes by quickly, and actually you're one of the few guests out of about 70 that I actually want to talk to again. Not that I want to talk to. I talk to Marion Nessel all the time, but just like it's so interesting what you're doing. Um, so we talked about this met from now started looking at one way to describe the four pieces is that biointelligence test measures health span covers
Mhm.
no what is biointelligence testing? That's the
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. So one of the things that we want to do with Healthspan Horizons is we're hoping that people will, utilize the system, right? Input data that they're doing from just
Right,
their consumer journeys and data that's readily available. But we also want to add in a lot of data that's not readily available. So
right.
actually coming back to your earlier question on
So it kind of
testing,
goes yeah.
like I went through a lot of tests, but I focus very much on tests that are out there commercially right now that you can get from people today.
Right.
But there's a lot of depth, and what I think is going to be most useful that you can't really get today, which is like a proteomics test. So all these proteins that are going around in your blood, where we pull most like disease biomarkers and so forth come out of these. Um, but you
And
can do
say
them.
the words again.
Proteomics. Basically, it's like
Proteomics.
all the proteins that you can
All the
find.
proteins.
Kind of
Proteomics.
the way that scientists, at least this was
Right.
speak about this. There's all these small molecules that are circulating in your body. So these can be toxins and nutrients, and these are metabolites. And so there's something called metabolomics where you measure hundreds and hundreds of these, and there's thousands of them. Some of them can be measured, some of them can't right now, and you get that. So what we'll be doing in the biointelligence test is basically building a system so that if people are coming through Healthspan Horizons, we want to have an ability to be able to generate a lot of this much deeper data, and in the context of a research study, actually be able to open up some of the things that are seen there, and people could even do a little bit of exploration of the data, knowing that it's not yet it's not yet used for health advice and so forth. But it's one of the deepest ways that we can unlock um, insights. And so one of the other things we'll be looking at with Healthspan Horizons is for people that go in and do a blood draw, we're going to set up also a special way so they can do that. So maybe they're just going to go and they'll get all their standard markers that they're going to do as it. But if they're part of the Healthspan Horizons study, we'll get it set up so that we get an extra vial of blood that can come back to the buck.
Oh, that's
And
great.
then we'll actually go try to fundraise separately to get money to do things like proteomics and epigenetics and metabolomics and things of that nature so that we can do discovery. This is very related, by the way,
And
to
those tests do exist, just not from a commercial perspective. The epigenetics, the
epigenetics. The epigenetics tests do for biological age. That's true.
yeah.
Proteomics, they exist commercially. I don't know. They're not really something that consumers go do. Like SomaLogic has a really big test, right? Olink has a test. They're trying to get them ready for people to be able to use them in a normal kind of
Right.
way.
As a commercial viable for the basically they call them the crazies, that subset that's willing to do almost anything to find out what's going on with their bodies.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. You
Yeah,
can do a metabolomics test
and we're
right now.
trying to normalize it so that we can get data for public health to change people's lives. We're trying to normalize some of those testings, or at least I am, and I think you are too, so that people,
Exactly.
yeah,
And that's one of the things we're trying to catalyze through this because we use such a relatively small number of molecules for health. And there's some reason, right? They've been honed over time, but it was very much around a paradigm of only being able to make small numbers of measurements. And now you can really measure vastly more and you can interpret vastly more than before.
Yeah.
And so, we wrote a paper kind of about all this transition for Cell Systems recently with the title of We Wait for Disease to Shout. What if we listened when biology whispers? And the idea being that there's all these
That's
subtle changes in
you
these
could you
things.
come up with those titles because that's fantastic,
That's a
Michael.
pretty good.
It's a really
It was
good
my
title.
postdoc that came up with that
Yeah,
particular one. Annalise came up with that one.
it's really really good. Just so
Yeah, I joked with her. I'm like, in 3 years, I'll think that I came up with it. She's like, no, you didn't. That was mine. I'm like, I know.
depending on how much
Yeah, exactly. If
energy
I
you get to your
right,
brain.
if I stay mentally sharp, I'll remember. But now it's on video, right? She came up with that title.
Yeah.
But she's like, what do you think about this for the title? I was like, oh, that's good. I like,
It's so good. I mean,
I
so
like
good. Yeah.
yeah, that title is
But
good.
anyway, yeah. So you're saying so. I mean, that stuff is so fantastic, and also like just the whole thing about like studying wellness. So going back to what we originally, because we have like three minutes left. When we were talking about blue zones, what do you, I mean? That's really soft research. I mean, there's not a lot of hard research going on there. Am I wrong? Am I getting that wrong? Or you know,
Yeah, I think the blue zones are very useful, right? To notice like, all right, there seem to be certain parts of the world where people live particularly
yeah,
long.
yeah,
What are they doing? What's different? Try to
right,
try to learn from them. So I think that is all very useful. I mean, one of the big things that's come out of that kind of research as well is how much environment kind of trumps personal
yes.
decision making in
and,
many
and
cases.
also and also things like communal living and last night we were at dinner.
Sociality.
Yeah, well, last night we were at dinner with my daughter and we I started it was a hibachi grill thing. We did, and the people sitting with you. So I started talking to people next to me. They're from Malaysia. They're here in New York for the first time. The other three people at the table were gold medal. It was a medalist, a 4-time medalist at the Olympics. And they have a big meet today. And my daughter's like, "Oh, you're embarrassing me. Like talk. You just can't stop talking." And I and I just thought, well, you know what? The research is showing that these small interactions are actually improve longevity and health span. So
Oh,
there's all
sure.
these other things, that blue zones are telling us about graciousness, things that you wouldn't think touch. Everybody always thinks diet, exercise, sleep, but there's all this other stuff that's going on that we're not completely in touch with. And there's not a lot of, like you said in the very beginning of this talk, there's not a lot of money. You can go to the NIH, want to study how small communications are going to impact, meeting the cab driver and having a talk with them, or going in the grocery store or the deli, or you buy your coffee, and having those small interactions and how they impact your health span and so forth. So those things I feel like they're underrated, and they are have sometimes as much impact as taking a multivitamin or whatever it might be. So I always wonder about those things. So in the 1 minute that we have, 2 minutes left, I want to finish the list of dietary, because I like people to get something from this that they wouldn't necessarily get it elsewhere. And like, what other diet? So we talked about creatine, we talked about uh, um, uh, omega threes, especially if you're deficient of iron, and making sure that that there's always this level of deficiency. If you get deficiency to normalization, that is a huge step. And some people are not deficient, and it won't help them to take omega threes and DHA and EPA, etc. Taking more doesn't mean you're going to get better. So what are the things that we should be taking that we may not be, if you're willing to take that leap with us?
Yeah, again with the caveat that I
Yeah,
like personalized testing all,
yeah,
all the time to see what a person really needs. I
right.
mean, one supplement that I think is quite interesting um, is urolithin A, which has some effects on mitochondrial health. I think that's
Okay.
an interesting one. In full disclosure, Thorne does not sell that supplement. That's
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's
don't
okay
really have
about
that
Thorn. I
one,
mean,
but
I have to say, I mean, I
I
was,
think that's a good one.
it wasn't why I chose you to be on this
Yeah,
webinar, but I was actually excited. I was like, is that the Thorn that I like, is,
yeah.
is a good supplement? I was like, oh, thank goodness he's not part of some bad supplement company that,
Thorne has been a fantastic place. Yeah,
yeah,
but
they're a
yeah.
fantastic place. And I'm really excited to
Urolithin
meet
A, I
you.
think is a good one. Berberine,
Yeah.
it's kind of, it shouldn't be. conflate it as a GLP-1 or anything like that, but berberine
Right.
has a lot of good
Yeah.
metabolic health effects in general for people. Um, I think that sleep being so important. I think that sleep, can be a
Yeah.
benefit. We've done quite a lot around a deep sleep complex or magnesium glycinate, which you can get from different places.
Yeah.
Very positive, like feedback from people about that one,
Yeah.
having a big effect. Um, so I think there's a lot of those kind of things. But again, my strong inclination for people, who are getting into this space is what are you actually doing? What is it that can make an incremental benefit? So you're just getting a little more bang for your buck from the work
Yeah.
you're putting in, and then diving in around personalization because I don't see you know, I don't know of any hero compound. There's no compound that's been shown,
Right.
that's going to make a big difference in your longevity right now, but they can have very big effects if it's the thing or the set of things that you're deficient on or missing or you're trying to get an edge on. Then there's very clear shown evidence that those things can make a real difference, but it's quite different person to person.
Well, I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Price. It's been wonderful having you here. Again, I want to, definitely in 6 months, or I'd love to have you back on and talk about what are we in Healthspan Horizon, like 6 months, a year? Are we looking at?
Yeah, 6 months would
Yeah.
be
So,
would be
when
great.
we're
We'll
launching.
have launched by then. We'll have people
Okay,
come
and
in the room and
I'm
we'll
going to
do
have
that
you. I'm
there.
going to interview again and maybe get to some of the 20 questions I prepared.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Go to foodmedcenter.org. Join the other 160,000 people that get weekly news and research digest. Find out about what's coming out from really good, strong journals and get summaries of them. It's all free. Everything we do here is free. So thank you, Dr. Price, and thank you, everybody. And look forward to connecting with you again soon. Take care.